There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn the Book Maniac. Welcome back to another episode of Zooming In, where I discuss bookish readerly articles online with bookish social media luminaries the world over. And I'd like to welcome back Bernie of Bernie Lombardi fame on Bookstagram. Hello, Bernie.
Hi, Shawn.
Just about any article I find for consideration in this series, I could have a fabulous chat with Bernie. But this one, I couldn't think of anybody else. This is perfect for Bernie and I to discuss. This article was published in Bookriot just a couple of weeks ago. It is called Nuance on the Internet Isn't Dead, in Praise of Bookstagram Scholarship by Laura Sackton. So, you must know that Bernie's the preeminent bookstagrammer. He certainly is in my universe. And he's an English prof. So, Bernie, what did you make of this article?
I thought it was great. I think that Laura touches on a lot of things that bookstagrammers think about, and you probably get this as a booktuber as well. I feel like the conversation overlaps between the two platforms because we do similar things. But yeah, I think that she raises a lot of good concerns, and I agreed with mostly everything she said. We'll talk about which the different things that she brought up, but I would say that I mostly agree with everything.
I would say that it's a really well-written article, and she has introduced me to a lot of bookstagrammers I wasn't aware of. I followed all of them as I was reading the article. Click, click, click. But the main title of the essay, I'm in complete agreement with. Nuance on the Internet Isn't Dead. That's true. It's not. It's not dead. And she gives many examples of some really solid book reviews and book reviews that go beyond just your typical book review, that get really down into the weeds where it is real literary criticism. And I hadn't seen very many of those, but they do exist on Bookstagram. That's fabulous. I'm not sure about calling it scholarship, because when I think of scholarship, and this is not, I don't think I'm being a gatekeeper, although there are some book related issues in which I do very proudly call myself a gatekeeper. But in this case, I don't think I'm being a gatekeeper. I just think scholarship is not the right word. Professor Bernie, what do you think?
I would agree. I think that in ways the conversations had on Bookstagram are just as important, if not more important, than what we traditionally think of as scholarship in like the academic sense. But I think for me, like as somebody who has been in both worlds, I don't want to call what's going on as books on Bookstagram scholarship. I want to escape that. So I would say that I agree that I don't love using that term, even though I don't think that it's completely wrong. I think that we can bend the term to mean whatever we want it to mean. And so, like you said, like this isn't about gatekeeping. I just think of based on like my experience, I wouldn't want to identify as, writing scholarship on Bookstagram because I think I like what I do on Bookstagram separate from that.
Yeah. I mean, looking at the example articles that she has linked to in this essay, I think any of them would be worth citing, footnoting in a work of academic scholarship, but they are not themselves. They don't have footnotes. They don't have a bibliography. They're not peer reviewed. And I guess that's all gatekeeping, but I think they're probably more important than scholarship. I'll dig myself out of my hole by ending on that note.
I agree. I think that to an extent, I think publishers rely on Bookstagram and influencers and the people, the actual people reading the books and their opinions more so than they consider academics and like close-knit world of academic scholarship that a lot of it is like not very approachable and I think that in ways Bookstagrammers are becoming more and more important up against academics.
Absolutely. And I mean, who goes to literary academic journals to find out what current fiction to read? I mean, it's just, yeah, it's not, the analogy doesn't quite work. But putting that aside, nuance is very much alive on the internet. I think the thing that was the most valuable to me was the links, the examples she cites. I already follow If This Is Paradise, but she links to Akila's review of a work of Caribbean, I think, poetry called Lundozino, if I'm pronouncing that right, that is about queer folks of African descent. And it is breathtakingly gorgeous writing that really goes down into the weeds about all of the stuff to do with where that poetry comes from. And I mean, instead of calling it scholarship, I would just say it's publishable. It could be published in the New Yorker or the Atlantic. So, that's kind of the thing that I would say. It's really substantive, art, eloquent literary criticism. Who are some of the other ones that you're familiar with that are here?
So I've known Sreddy for a really long time. The person she writes about that talked about Bessie Head, and I actually, he's one of the few that I know because he straddles both worlds like me. I think he's still a PhD candidate at Northwestern in African literature. I don't think he graduated yet, but like that's how I know him, from like moving between both of those worlds, and he's great. And then Kristen also. I think Kristen is a really good example of this whole conversation about nuance, because she can write really critical reviews, but she doesn't do it to create a hot take. Like, it's not, there are definitely people on Bookstagram who really just care about the performance that they're their performance of like giving hot takes. But I think that she, in her criticisms, always like kind of like brings it back to the subjectivity of it all and really invites people to engage with her in a respectful manner. I've been in group chats with her, have done group buddy reads with her, and she's really, really awesome. So I think she's actually like a really good example of like this nuance idea.
Maybe another way to probe this a little further, Bernie, is can you just do a little riff on a comparison and contrast on what you do in your academic writing compared to what you do on Bookstagram?
Sure. So I do have to say that while I still teach, I have moved away from the academic world in regards to like literature. I do other like kind of research stuff now, but I've moved away from that. But when I was really into that, I would say as much as I try to separate it, the one thing that I like that my academic background has given me is it's kind of like shaped and trained the way I approach a text. And I think that that's pretty apparent in my reviews and when I talk about books on Instagram. I think that you could probably see that, whether or not like the viewer understands how they're connected. I see that they're connected because I think similarly. But I do like the way that on Bookstagram, I can kind of just talk about the book and talk about it in relation to other people talking about the book. And I don't need to, bring it into conversation with like theoretical texts and, things like that. I would say that's the biggest difference. In academia, you talk about books in relation to theory and that stuff. Whereas this, you just talk about the book in the context of like the world we live in.
Your subjective response and your
and in academia, like that need to kind of like be in conversation can take away from like the almost like the natural feel of talking about a book that we
absolutely. So what you're really saying here, Bernie, is that you don't have fluffy Fridays at work?
No.
If you didn't know, and what you should be following Bernie. Bernie does I do a Friday reads. Bernie does fluffy Fridays, so they're fabulous. I think that no matter where it is, BookTube, Bookstagram, where else? Book Talk, I guess. I've never really looked into Book Talk because I'm too old. They wouldn't let me in, I'm sure. That you can find serious readers writing or speaking, serious reviewing. That's to me, that's the message. You can find nuance everywhere. You just got to look for it. I recently taped, it hasn't been published yet, but I recently taped a chat about book annotation with somebody who's really a real book annotator. And she does have a beef with a lot of the kind of people that you think of on Bookstagram that are just like to have pretty pictures of their books and stuff. And that they often show really pretty book annotating that where every line of the 2-page spread is highlighted in a different color with different colored tabs. And she just says, I can't imagine what the purpose of that is other than to make an Instagram post, but book annotation itself is serious. So you can always find that if that's what you're looking for. And there is fluffy, not not fluffy Friday, but fluffy, non-serious kind of look at me, I'm an influencer type of post, but there's lots of gold there too beneath all that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Instagram did start as, it focused on the image, right? So I don't really, I think it's okay. I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't have an issue with posts that are about the aesthetic of the image, because that's really what Instagram started as, and is part of the point. And I mean, I really like that, and I think that there's a lot to say about books as objects, which is really good. But I also completely agree that you can find, like, there's nuance. You can find the nuance. I think that as somebody on Bookstagram who's been on Bookstagram for a bunch, several years now, I feel like they're kind of like two main aspects of the Bookstagram experience. There's the influencer experience, and then there's the community experience. And I find there's a lot, there are a lot of us, and I think I'm one of them, who kind of like has a hand in both of those sides. But I think that the community side of it is really, really, really rich with nuance. So like, if you want to, like you said, like, it's there, and you can become a part of that. And in the article, I really liked how she talks about, you don't need, prerequisites to become a part of that community. You don't need to, like, get approved or have an application. Like, you can find it and you can become a part of it, and it's really, really not that difficult, and it's really, really rich and rewarding. And that the influencer kind of like, performance in your face thing is always going to be there. There's some, like everybody, there are some Bookstagrammers on there that just annoy the heck out of me, because it's about the hot take, it's about the performance. I had one really close Bookstagrammer friend who kind of like, we were really, really close, and this Bookstagrammer kind of took off and then was just like all about the performance, and it caused a lot of resentment. As they took off, they started to like not trust people and like not trust me. It just became really, really, really weird. So needless to say, we don't talk anymore. Things like that, I think, is like one side of it. But then there's like such an amazing side on the other, on the other hand, that I think is great.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you could regale us with very similar stories from academia. So it doesn't matter what the milieu is, you're going to get that kind of person.
Yeah.
So maybe a good way to close, Bernie, is this article mentions, I don't know, 4 or 5 Bookstagrammers that are really substantive, nuanced Bookstagrammers. Can you give us 3 more names that aren't here that you think we should check out?
Oh, and this is so hard, and please forgive me if I don't mention you. And I'm not going to mention anybody that has like over 20,000 followers. I'm going to mention people with less followers. I would say Nell reads books Nell's from Australia. And then I will say Annie's Many Books, and Annie's from the West Coast, or she's not originally from the West Coast, but she lives in the West Coast of the USA. And then I will say, I'm already like, oh, there's so many more, and I'm gonna forget somebody. One more is Karina, Time for Reading. Karina's from Toronto, but there's so many more, but those are 3 that I love.
And I would invite people watching this video to put other suggestions in the comments. Thanks for this lovely, oh so nuanced chat.
Thanks for having me. I loved it. I love talking with such nuance when we're together.
There we go. It sometimes happens.